Kenshi is a unique game. You can become the ultimate swordsman, be beaten unconscious for your food, take up a trade, become enslaved, build your own town, and then be invaded and cast out from said town. This past month or so, I can't get enough. So, to feed my addiction, I decided to do an Iron Man run with a small twist. I thought it'd be fun to limit myself to a max of exactly 8 characters who use their own unique weapon class. Before we begin, let's go into the rules for my challenge. First and foremost, this is obviously an Iron Man run, which means there are no resets. Gotta play it where it lies. Barring, of course, crashes that fail to save before exiting. Second, no 2 weapons alike. I must use the character's chosen weapon. This does limit the training of dexterity though, so there is an exception that katanas can be the same level as their main weapon stat, and not any higher. The same for martial arts with dodge. Third, try to remain as honorable as possible, meaning avoiding cheese and playing the game as mostly intended. Thievery from innocence is considered a last resort that is to be treated as such. Finally, have fun. Kenshi is a game that molds itself to how you want to play. There are no goals or rules aside from what you have for yourself. For full disclosure, this game is modded for quality of life stuff and minor things I think add to the experience. On the screen is my in-game mod list. Not too many, but just want to keep us all on the same page. And here's what it looks like in Vortex, just in case there's differences in mod titles. And if you're curious about the whole journey, I've recorded every second as a full playthrough, which can be found in a playlist here. Here we have Gilder, our possibly temporary protagonist, who will brave a single grueling timeline in his journey to become the world's strongest. His goal is to dismantle the Holy Nation and defeat the mysterious Catlon. Or he may end up in a ditch somewhere. Time will tell. Gilder has arrived in the hub, the central location of the world and the starting point of the basic Wanderer's start. Gilder has dreams of acquiring allies to take down the Holy Nation of which he was a former citizen. He saw the bloodshed and evil his nation was capable of and fought tooth and nail to escape. Now here he stands with nothing to his name and nothing to his skill set as he begins his journey to becoming a Ronin of legend. He sets out immediately from the safety of the hub. Time waits for no man after all. His first task is mining for some spare cash. While outside of town, he must be on the lookout for the relatively weak but still deadly packs of bandits that lurk outside the walls. While mining on his first day of true freedom, he is already accosted by bandits. He tries to intimidate them away, but has to break out a family motto. He makes it to the bar where his confidence swells and is immediately taken down a peg when he's beaten so hard he fuses with a man. To the survivor goes the spoils, and Gilder was a survivor. Wrapping up his boo-boos, he eyes a sweet pair of pants and takes them for his own. After selling his legitimately collected goods, he buys a true tool of the samurai, a ninja blade. And jerky. Realizing he doesn't look the part of a Ronin, he buys a pair of sandals, which are oddly cozy and speed enhancing. Back to the daily grind. In the distance, a bandit presence looms, as well as a heated battle. Like any good vulture, he checks what the commotion is. Bone dogs. Stealthily, he moves into the lair and makes off with what the bone dogs don't plan on using anytime soon. A decent haul for the first night out. Seems someone tried to escape, but couldn't make it in time. But Gilder would not repeat the same failing. A solid day of scavenging deserves a rest. And then it's back to mining in the morning, and assisting his new partners in crime. He empties his bag for his second shift. Good work, fellow employee. Now it's time for the janitor to sweep up. The bone dogs threatened to call HR after mauling Gilder, but hey, this shirt really highlights the eyes. No calls from HR today, but it's time for payday. Take that, Lawrence. He won't be needing these. Can't forget the copper. Returning to the bone dog nest, Gilder spots a strange sheen and moves to check it out. A moon cleaver. He takes a look. He takes a second look. And a third. They may see him, but Gilder has other things in mind. Armor made of scrap metal? You shouldn't have. Now, do I look like 20 bucks or what? Now the Garos seem to have moved in. Luckily that makes the pickings easier. Gilder is now the 1% of the slums, and he immediately begins sizing up real estate ventures. He eventually picks the home with the quickest alcohol access and begins buying handyman supplies and a shirt to begin construction. Ah, home sweet home. Now it's time for a housewarming celebratory meal. With protein acquired, Gilder begins phase 2 of his plan. But first he'll need a body. Lawrence will do. Using his gym buddy for extra weight, he does an over-encumbered stair mile until the sun comes up, then heads to the convenience store to buy a bunch of bricks.
Oh, fajitas.
Gilder can feel the massive gains surging his strength, but now it's time to exercise the strongest muscle, the brain. With Lawrence in tow, he deciphers the secrets of box technology and stores away his large prize to be used by a future ally. After some interior design dabbling, he sets Lawrence down, nabs some more food, and mines for more cash. As he heads out, he's approached by angry locals, and he knows exactly what he must do. Drop everything and book it. Bolstered by reinforcements, they fight as equals. Surprisingly, Gilder can hold his own when all he does is block. As the last bandit falls, he begins taking donations from the unconscious, goes to pick up his copper, and gets jumped again. Gilder runs to the bar where, after being cut halfway through his stomach, begins bandaging up. He returns to the bloodbath and uses a knocked out man as a copper backpack to help sell his goods. Returning to town, it seems a man got stuck ascending at 1/1000th of the journey. Unfazed, he heads to bed and dreams of more research where he can play God. With 10,000 cats in tow, he buys himself a lifetime gym membership. During his long, arduous training, the director gets bored and starts chatting about Pokemon Sleep.
I got a shiny Psyduck. He's blue.
Day turns to night. Marking the beginning of day 7, the cameraman figures out the free camera. The Shinobi Guild offers deals to their members, including the very useful Thieves' Backpack. So Gilder sets out to make up the missing funds, breaking up a bar fight in the process. The backpack has now been acquired. During one of his hauls, Gilder sees a bouncer attempt to throw an unconscious body onto the roof, but now Gilder is feeling a bit down. He spent all week looting and doing menial labor. Perhaps it's time to look for partners. So he decides to complete any unfinished business that night and set off for Squin in the morning. Adventure awaits. The half-mile journey to Squin is arduous, hellish, and famine-inducing. Finally arriving in a local bar, he begins scouting prospects. After some searching, he spots through the floorboards a Shek with a peculiar glint in her eye. He heads over to speak with her. Ruka, as she introduced herself, explained that she fell in battle and did not die, earning the disdain of her people. Gilder responded that it wasn't her time to die, that she can get stronger still. He saw potential in her. With that, Ruka joins the party. Seeing how uncomfortable Ruka is with the plank on her back, Gilder suggests that maybe a more direct approach with a blunt weapon would be more suitable. So they head to the store in search of one, but none to be seen. But they do spot a beautiful falling sun and take a moment to gaze upon it. Using Gilder's excess funds, they buy a set of armor for Ruka. And one smuggling check later, they make it back to the hub, where Ruka acquires her first mace, lovingly held onto by Gilder, covered in rust. Ruka heads off to sell her plank as she no longer needs it, and bemoans that the Shinobi Guild is out of stock of medium thieves' backpacks. A brief shopping trip later, and they set out for an abandoned tower just visible out of town. When they arrive, they see it's full of weapons to sell. So many, in fact, to carry the haul faster, Gilder removes his pants. The cool night air on his thighs invigorates him. After selling the goods, Gilder remarks, "Man, now that they're off, I don't want to put my pants back on." "Please put them on," replies Ruka. Pants reapplied and off into the wilderness, it isn't long before wildlife take a huge chunk out of Gilder's mostly unarmored chest. When they get back, Gilder resumes his research. Meanwhile, Ruka is above that nerdy stuff and spends her time appropriately by picking fights. But it looks like the lone guard got the rest of them. Mining it is for now. Elsewhere, Gilder is deaf to the battle cries outside his door. After breaking out of his research stupor, Gilder tries to clean up the rabble and whiffs every swing. Having returned, Ruka begrudgingly buys a small backpack for now. More bandits decide that the hub should be theirs and the two of them aid in routing them. Afterwards, Gilder sleeps off research brain while Ruka does strength training along the walls. That morning, unsurprisingly, the medium backpacks have restocked. Furiously, Ruka trades hers in for a larger one. Now fully geared up, the two of them head northeast through the Holy Nation, their destination the deserts of the United Cities. Outside of Stack, they see patrols and bandits, so deciding to test their strength, they take on a group of the bandits. But the fight does not start well as Gilder is pummeled relentlessly, and before he's able to get away, Gilder is beaten into submission. Seeing him fall, Ruka immediately rushes to Gilder's aid, picking him up and running. Realizing she can't escape while slowed down, Ruka makes a split-second decision to stabilize Gilder before she is knocked unconscious. She fails. Luckily, they both come to. While the bandits are distracted by the Whole Nation patrol from earlier, Ruka administers first aid and Gilder takes a moment to admire his less destructible abs. Then they slink away, totally in view of everyone fighting, whereupon they are beset by bone dogs and break off into full sprint. Fortunately, their leg injuries weren't severe enough to hinder their escape. Ruka moves to hide outside of town while Gilder heads inside to look for sleeping bags. While inside, Gilder thinks about how the Holy Nation will attempt to kill or enslave Ruka and himself if he doesn't say she's a slave, but he refuses to go with the charade. At the very least, he buys a state-sanctioned Holy Flame copy to at least look the part. While searching the stores, Gilder spots a potential recruit, but decides against it. His potential lies elsewhere. Meanwhile, a bone dog narrowly doesn't notice Ruka, and back inside, no sleeping bags to be found, but maps will help. Exiting the last store, Gilder sees the entire city fighting off a single bone dog. These people are truly insane. He returns with the supplies, including a half-eaten food cube. Stack was a bust, but maybe they'd have better luck in Blister Hill. Why is it always bone dogs? Outside Blister Hill, the same tactic used in Stack returns as Gilder searches for sleeping bags. He is successful partly, but only one is available. He rushes to Ruka, who insists that she take first watch, as he's more injured. Ruka reflects on Gilder's kindness in that he could have slept in a bar while she slept in the rain, but instead treated her as an equal. But her thoughts are broken when she notices a patrol moving by and ducks behind a rock. They didn't see her. Gilder takes second watch, and he thinks on how Ruka tried to rescue him the moment he went down, and that while brash, he's a good sort. Morning comes, and fully rested, they pack up the bags. Gilder is anxious that Ockran's shield won't let them through, so he begins running in his head alternate paths. Aside from the straight shot from Ockran's shield, the two other options are the long way through the mountains, where they would pass by Rebirth, the Holy Nation's biggest slave camp, or go through the Iron Valley, which while shorter is more dangerous due to the acid rain and what lurks inside. Before he makes his decision, they are welcomed by acid rain just outside the border. They arrive at the border crossing and sneak a peek at the checkpoint that laughs as it stands as an obstacle between them. Deciding to take the shorter but treacherous Iron Valley route, they figure the acid rain isn't too bad for a quick run through, but soon they discover why this path is considered deadly. Standing in their path is an iron spider, a deadly ancient robot with thick steel plating. Their only choice is to turn and run. Luckily they're slow and there was only one of them, but as they look back at their attacker, a second one just barely misses the both of them. They decide to take their chances with the fort. They are let through, but surrounded by looks of disgust and disdain from the soldiers who see the two of them journeying as equals. But Ruka is a friend, and she tried to save Gilder when he couldn't hold his own. He's indebted to her, and would never forsake her. As they exit the fort, they spawn another friend wandering by. They give it a wide berth. The desert is more tranquil than they imagined, and despite the heat bearing down upon them, they breathe a sigh of relief. That is until they walk by a skimmer ambush and realize they should still be on edge. But still they stop to take in the view of Stoat in the distance, just barely visible through the clouds of sand. It's in these sand clouds they deign themselves wandering acolytes, as they are masters-to-be, legends in the making. In the poor visibility, they see the shadow of manhunters, the worst of slavers, who will kidnap anyone wandering the sands. They do not stop until they safely arrive in Stoat, whereupon they spot a skimmer outside the gates. They hatch a scheme to lure it towards the guards and then skin it for money. In the fight, Gilder takes a substantial blow to the stomach, quashing any future ideas of using the skimmers for easy hunting. Apparently they didn't need to lure the skimmer, as this seems to be a common pest control problem. As they skin the cast-aside skimmers, they watch as rebel farmers attack the city, unsure whether their allegiances are one and the same. They look on as the battle rages. After selling at the bar, Gilder heads upstairs to rest, while Ruka checks around the bar. In it, she spots a young woman, strange to see in such a rough crowd. Curious, Ruka heads over to talk to her. Izumi explains that she's looking for work as a field medic, so that she can continue her personal research, as well as pay off damages to a shop incurred by said research. It's a quick conversation, but Ruka hires her on the spot as Gilder and her tend to get beat up a lot. The sun rises as Gilder sleeps off his stomach wound. Izumi does cardio to prepare for the journey ahead, and Ruka enjoys a nice plate of pancakes for breakfast. Fully stuffed, Ruka buys new weapons for the crew as well as sturdier armor for Izumi. Izumi claims the Naginata. The acolytes' numbers grow. Seeing another city in the distance, they begin another journey. As they trek through the sands, they pass by a group fighting off skimmers. The squad don't have much confidence in them until they see one of them launch a skimmer through the air with one fell swing. Free money. Arriving in Shobatai, they immediately head to the local shinobi guild to outfit Izumi with a backpack, as well as stocking up on sleeping bags, and it's here that Gilder sees a vision. A vision of a timeline doomed to collapse due to one woman's poorly timed measurement of local minerals. Scary stuff. Anyways, off to Heft in the distance. You okay, Gilder? Yeah, just wondering why minerals destroyed a timeline. What? 4 starving vagrants. Surely we can handle them. The practice session commences. Izumi starts off with a beautiful first swing of her Naginata, but sadly she is whittled down by a barrage of attacks and ends up going down. Gilder turns to see his unconscious comrade but is wedged in and can't break free. Ruka holds her own, and Gilder uses that as an opportunity to stabilize Izumi, just as Ruka once did for him. Gilder stands blocking, unable to swing as he protects Izumi, but unfortunately he is knocked out. It's now 1v4, and Ruka is on the ropes, but she goes down as well. It wasn't until later on in editing that I had forgotten I had set them to block earlier. The bandits make off with their food, as well as one other thing that wasn't apparent at the time. Gilder is the first to wake up to their defeat. He immediately begins applying first aid to himself, as he can't risk falling unconscious again if he's to resuscitate his friends. A slaver caravan passes by as Gilder can only watch powerless, licking his wounds. Luckily, it splits off from the trader caravan and heads its own way. Gilder works to fully bandage Izumi. Having used up his bandage supply, Gilder crawls to Ruka and borrows her kit, and returns to bandage the severely wounded Izumi. After healing up Ruka as well, Gilder begins collecting the group's sleeping bags, laying out one and placing an ally inside one by one until he could rest himself. In their sleep, they hear the soft but heavy steps of a skimmer approaching and move to circumvent it. They may still be healing, but they're fast enough to move well enough so the group packs up. More skimmers lurk in the sandstorm. Weak but alive, they arrive in Heft, where they can fully rest. At least they would, if Gilder hadn't spent all their money to fight his crippling fajita withdrawals. So it's to the mines, where Gilder suddenly becomes aware of karma approaching, because of his gluttony. Feeling spicy, he decides to help the guards with the problem that came for him. He whiffs. But hey, money's money. Enough money, in fact, for 3 beds to use in their recovery. Gilder continues mining as they are still flat broke. Meanwhile, a strange mercenary looms over Ruka ominously. A single bandit decides to square up against Gilder. The bandit gets reinforcements, but Gilder has his own, in the form of the mysterious stranger. Ruka wakes up, prepared to start her day, when she is accosted by the bizarre man who attempts to assert dominance by failing to phase through a table. Realizing Ruka has been ignoring them, they resort to violence. As Gilder is getting beaten, it seems Ruka tuned out too hard. Ruka finally joins the fray, and it's at this point the director realizes that her mace went missing. Gilder, as usual, is down, curled on the ground like Yamcha. With no weapon to fight with, Ruka dodges her opponent's blows, while Gilder gets up and decides it's time to take these guys down a peg. Izumi's backed up against a boulder, fending off the blows of her would-be attacker. With their adversaries defeated, Ruka starts claiming the spoils of war. A lesson to future would-be racists. To make their journey easier, Ruka picks up some maps. Meanwhile, Gilder recovers for the millionth time, and Izumi mines to pass the time. The sun rises on a hopefully peaceful day, which it immediately turns out not to be, as Ruka is murked by a Jonin while the director was momentarily distracted by something unplugging. She goes down, losing a lot of blood, and Izumi moves to stem the blood loss as Gilder lures the Jonin away. Wanting the bounty, Gilder gets cocky and takes a blow to the chest. He attempts to nab the Jonin, but a guard takes her from his shoulders. Enough of heft, 'tis a silly place. During their long journey, a lone swordsman blocks the way and attacks the squad, but with the power of teamwork, they finally take down their first real foe alone. They then come across an abandoned village, which they immediately scour for forgotten goods. Weighed down by their loot, they resume their trek, and luckily travel without incident. That's when they spy Bark in the distance. Gilder reveals that he had set out for the United Cities in the first place because he heard tell of a thief of some renown in Bark. Upon entering town, he immediately begins scanning the locals. Eventually, someone bumps into him, and he quickly realizes he's been pickpocketed. This is the one. He sees Promise and talks to the thief. She goes by Red and is saving money to leave the dump that is Bark. Gilder offers her a place among the squad, lets her keep the cats, and offers her a gift that he's been carrying through the desert in anticipation of this moment, a crossbow. He knew once he heard of her, she was going to become a legendary shinobi. Loading up with cool hats, they leave the ramshackle town of Bark, intending for heft. That night, in the shadows of a sandstorm, they spot bandits ahead. Feeling bold, they manage to draw the attention of one. They take him down with only a few bolts in the back from accidental friendly fire. Trying to get the attention of another, they instead alert the whole group. A fatal mistake, but they welcome the challenge. In the chaos of battle, Izumi goes down. Gilder makes a juke and bandages Izumi's stomach. He battles a little while longer, while Ruka defends Red's ranged advantage. Meanwhile, Izumi comes to and begins crawling to safety. But as she does, eventually Gilder finally goes down. Izumi crawls toward the rapidly bleeding Gilder. Meanwhile, Ruka and Red emerge relatively unscathed. Izumi eventually manages to stop the bleeding. She then patches up the others. Even if Gilder does get up, his leg is too injured to walk fast enough for travel, so Red takes him over her shoulder. Luckily, Shobutai isn't too far away. They head inside and sleep off their wounds. Setback after setback, they have found themselves beaten and comatose. It's a disturbing trend. Their luck may one day run out. Do they have the perseverance to keep going? The barren move they live on does not care. The only thing there is to do is to push forward. Minimally injured, Red picks up a backpack and begins her shinobi training. Meanwhile, the world keeps turning.